Chapter 25. A Very Dark Swim. It wasn't long before even Arliss had reason to doubt the wisdom of their chosen path. As they made their way along the edge of the underground lake, the shore disappeared. Sheer cliffs dropped directly into the water on either side. Gustus stood at the very last bit of shoreline and scratched his head underneath his miner's helmet. "All right, boys, we're going to have to swim for it." He at least had the foresight to select for the mission only men who could swim, not a common skill among miners. "Everybody pull out your hardtack and eat what you can. I don't know how far we'll have to swim. I can't see around this bend. You're going to need your energy. Besides," he continued, "you won't be able to keep it dry, so you might as well eat it now rather than see it ruined." The men pulled the hard biscuits out of their packs and ate hungrily. "Cedric, Ernest," Gustus continued, "can you swim with one hand and hold a torch with the other?" Both men said that they could. "It won't ruin the extra torches if they get wet," observed Gustus. "We can shake most of the water out and the pitch will burn in any case. We can't let the tinder get wet. Arliss, is that tinder box still in your pack?" "Yes, sir," the young miner answered. "Take off your helmet, put the tinder box on top of your head, and strap your helmet down tight over it like this." Gustus demonstrated with his own helmet and tinder box. "Aiden, you a strong swimmer?" asked the old miner. "Yes, sir, pretty strong." Gustus pulled a third tinder box out of his pack and tossed it to Aiden. "Then you keep this one under your helmet. We got to keep these tinder boxes dry. Do not, do not, do not let your heads go underwater." Aiden strapped the tinder box under his helmet. He found it none too comfortable. By this time, Gustus had slid into the lake and was holding Cedric's torch while Cedric got in. Aiden followed, then Arliss and the other two miners. The water was the exact same temperature as the air, but it felt a lot colder, miserably cold at first. Nevertheless, it was a relief to their sore feet to be relieved of the strain of walking on the stone and mud. There was no telling how deep the water was, and Aiden tried not to imagine what sort of eyeless monsters might be lurking in its depths. He tried not to think about how such a creature might arise from a long sleep, awakened by the unfamiliar sound of 6 tasty Cornwalders thrashing around in his lake, and he refused to speculate as to how many minor scouts such a creature could swallow in a single bite, or how many it would take to satisfy its long dormant appetite. He just swam, staying as close to his comrades as possible. The company had hoped that the sheer rock on either side of the lake would soon yield again to sloping banks, but the men were disappointed. The little halo of the dim torches revealed nothing but looming cliffs on either side. They swam on in silence, clustered around the torches, held aloft by Cedric and Ernest. They settled into a steady rhythm and seemed to be making decent time. But though nobody said anything, they all wondered how much farther they would have to swim and how long they could go before reaching the point of exhaustion. The silence was suddenly broken by a terrified yelp, which was immediately drowned out by the sound of violent splashing. Just as suddenly, it grew dark. Turning toward the sound, Aiden saw a flailing hand break the water's surface, still clutching a doused torch. Then, in the gloomy light of one remaining torch, Ernest's face appeared, eyes bulging in panic, mouth wide in a desperate gasp, then disappeared again beneath the frothing water. Clayton and Cedric swam to their old friend's side, and the next time he came up for air, they each grabbed an arm in the ensuing flurry. Cedric's torch went under too, and the party found itself in total blackness. Above the thrashing and splashing came the clear voice of Gustus. "Clayton! Cedric! Sir! Sir! Do you have a hold of Ernest? We've got him." Clayton's voice came spluttering back. "But I don't know how much longer." "Ernest!" called Gustus, struggling to stay calm. He was answered by spews of water, then the high-pained voice of Ernest. "It's a cramp! Can't swim!" By this time Aiden had swum to the nearest wall and found a narrow handhold. "I'm on the wall," he called into the darkness. Gustus, Arliss, let's make a chain out to them. Zeroing in on Aiden's voice, Gustus and Arliss found him and joined hands. Aiden anchored to the rock, Arliss in the middle, Gustus sweeping his free hand out in the darkness toward the sound of splashing. He grabbed an arm as it flailed by and tugged the whole mass of struggling, thrashing miners to safety. Soon all 6 members of the party were clinging to the rock face, out of the immediate danger. Ernest was able to relax enough so that the cramp released its wrenching grip on his leg. Well, boys, what now? It was Cedric's voice. The silence and the blackness pressed down like a weight as each member of the party waited for somebody else to answer. Gustus finally spoke. Ernest, how you doing? Ernest's answer was indignant. We ain't turning back on my account, if that's what you're thinking. Another long pause bore down on them as Gustus thought things over. No fire, he said, half to himself, and we're not sure where we're going to be able to get any. That's not much of a reason to turn back now, offered Clayton. If we got no fire, we don't have much hope of making it back anyway. Cedric spoke up. I say we just follow this wall until we find a getting out place or until we just can't follow it no farther. They all agreed to Cedric's plan. If they found a way out of the lake and they could light their torches, the mission would go on. Otherwise, they would try to make their way back to the Cornwalder camp one way or another. So they continued their unlikely journey, half swimming, feeling their way along the limestone wall in perfect darkness, calling to one another at frequent intervals to ensure that no one got separated from the party. It was difficult to gauge time in the cave, where time was not measured by the movement of sun or stars, but by the nearly constant drip, drip, drip that gave shape to everything in the world beneath the world. The burning of torches had given the minor scouts a rough idea of the time they had spent in the cave, but they had no idea how long they had been creeping along the rock wall in the darkness. It might have been a couple of hours, it might have been shorter, or, for the matter, much longer. Aiden was famished, growing weaker by the minute. It wasn't only hunger and fatigue that drained him, but the darkness itself, which seemed determined to swallow every spark of hope he could generate. His hands had grown soft from soaking in the water. The abrasive stone was painful to his fingertips. His helmet, or more particularly the tinderbox underneath his helmet, had grown especially irksome. He had even managed to swim blisters on his feet, the result of swimming in boots. The whole group had grown sullen. The darkness had obviously done its work on the minor scouts, too. It seemed an hour since anyone had spoken a word. Then up at the front of the line, Gustus bellowed in pain. Ah, my knee! In the darkness, the travelers all piled in to one another, unaware that their leader had stopped, lodged against an outcropping of stone just below the water's surface. The old miner was more surprised than hurt by the collision, and he forgot all about the pain in his knee when he realized that the ledge became a gently sloping shelf rising out of the water and offering a dry surface to stand on. The whole party scrambled out of the water, rejoicing to be on dry land. Tinder boxes, whooped Gustus, and before Aiden could even get his helmet off, he heard the chick, chick, chick of flint on steel. Shake a torch dry, ordered Gustus as he continued clicking away with the flint. The flying sparks were a welcome sight to eyes accustomed to total darkness. The tinder caught, then the fat lighter, and as Gustus scooped the burning splinter into Cedric's torch, the miners dared to hope that their mission might be completed after all. Nestled in the still damp fibers of the cane torch, the flame guttered and smoked, and Aiden felt his heart in his throat. But the pine pitch embedded in the stingy cane innards popped to light, and the little halo of light revealed that the stone they stood on was not just a little shelf, but a broad passageway, where all 6 could walk abreast if they chose. As Gustus was lighting a second torch, Arliss gave them the best news they had heard in many hours. The passage led south, back toward the Perthen camp. Clayton clasped Arliss in a bear hug that lifted him up off the ground. Hurrah for the miner's head, he whooped. Energized by their improved prospects, and also worried that their torches wouldn't last, they made their way down the passage at a brisk pace, almost at a trot. How much fire we got left? Asked Ernest, who had long since recovered from his cramp. Let's see, said Gustus, stroking his beard. We started with 20 pair. That was the seventh pair that you and Clayton lost in the water. These are the eighth pair. 2 more pairs after these, and we turn it around. Step it up, boys, called Arliss. No time to waste. They were almost running now down the broad corridor, and they sang their high-spirited caving song. Oh, the miners brave of Greasy Cave came out the other side. They braved the gloom, they challenged the doom, they made an into Perth and pride. Foldy, roldy, roldy, foldy, roldy, roldy, foldy, roldy, fiddly, foldy, roll. The ninth pair of torches was burning when Arliss noticed something odd on the ceiling above them. It looked like a twisted mass of gigantic snakes spiraling out 30 feet or more, branching and intertwined. Arliss nudged Aiden and pointed upward. Tree roots, he observed. We must be getting near the surface. Cedric looked up too. That's not a little tree either, he observed. Look at the size of those roots. Aiden stopped short. We're in the middle of the plain. There aren't many trees. Not that size, anyway, offered Arliss. There are a few big pine trees and a few big cedars. Gustus craned his neck to study the root system. I've tunneled under many a pine tree. Those aren't pine roots. Not cedar either. That's a hardwood. A hardwood, shouted Arliss excitedly. There ain't but one big hardwood within eyeshot of camp. That's the live oak the giant used to stand by every afternoon. So Aiden began. We're standing underneath the Perthan camp, shouted Gustus. We're almost there. Not a minute too soon, observed Clayton, as the torch in his hand guttered out. They lit a 10th pair of torches, their last before they would have to turn back, and pressed on. 5 minutes later, the passageway narrowed to a tight crevice. Gustus held his torch to the crevice and tried to peer through. He looked down at his broad chest and shook his head. He turned sideways and leaned into the crack. He groaned and pushed with his legs, but it was clear to everyone that there was no use. You'd have to be an eel to get through that hole, he sighed dejectedly. We've come so far. His voice cracked with emotion. He buried his head in his hands. So far. Aiden stepped up to the crevice. Sir? He asked. Gustus, mind if I give it a try? Gustus looked up. His wet eyes glistened in the torchlight. Sure, son, he answered, trying to smile. That's why we brought you, isn't it? Squeeze into spots where old fat miners can't go. Aiden sidled into the crack, a torch in his lead hand. His pack swung around to his trailing shoulder. It was a tight fit. It grew tighter as he progressed through the crevice. As the walls closed in, he could feel panic rising in his gorge. He heard Arliss's voice behind him. If you're stuck, breathe out. Don't hold your breath. It went against his instincts, but Aiden did as Arliss said. Arliss did, after all, have the miner's head. He blew out steadily and felt his chest contract just enough to dislodge him. Then before he realized what had happened, he popped through to the other side. To his surprise, Arliss was right behind him. Thought I'd have a look too, Arliss explained. How in the world did you get through? Asked Aiden. For though Arliss was the skinniest of the miners, he was still bigger than Aiden. One more bite of hardtack, and I couldn't have made it, grinned Arliss. Where they stood, the cave broadened again. They were facing due west. Do you smell that? Asked Arliss. Since they had gone underground, they had smelled nothing but the damp, earthy smell. Now, for the first time, they smelled something else. And the aroma was unmistakable. It was a sharp, sweet, smoky smell that drifted over when the Perthans fired their thunder tubes. From the other side of the crevice came the voice of Gustus. Arliss! Aiden! What do you see? Arliss called back through the crack. I think we've made it. We can smell the smoke of the Perthans' thunder tubes, and we have a broad tunnel leading west. Aiden and Arliss heard the sounds of celebration on the other side of the crevice. But the celebrations quickly subsided, and the miner scouts were talking business again. Fresh torch, called Cedric, and Aiden noticed that his own torch was getting close to the end, too. That would be the 11th pair, the end of the road. Gus's voice came calling through the crevice. Come on back, boys. Arliss looked at Aiden in horror. To have come so close just to turn around? They heard Gus's speaking to his comrades. He had shaken off the gloom he felt when he had gotten stuck at the mouth of the crevice. Limestone's soft and it breaks off in pretty big chunks. We should be able to cut a path big enough for a troop of lightly armed soldiers in a matter of hours. But not now, he continued. Fire's half gone. We've got to get back, boys, he shouted. You comin' or not? Aiden and Arliss didn't answer. They heard the voice of Clayton. Seems a shame not to let them look around a few minutes. They're that close. Gustus was firm. No. From the start, I said we'd turn around when we lit the 11th pair of torches, even if we could smell the Perthans. This part of the mission is over. We found the passage. But what good does that do if we don't get back to camp with the news? Aiden and Arliss pressed their ears to the crack, straining to hear every word. Tomorrow, continued Gustus, we come back with a whole troop of soldiers and as many torches as they can carry. Aiden, Arliss, he bellowed. You're about to get left. I'm not going back, whispered Aiden. Arliss stared at him. I'm going to see the Perthan end of this cave with my own eyes. Are you with me? Arliss was obviously torn. He wanted to continue the mission as badly as Aiden did, but he had never disobeyed Gustus. He's my foreman. He's the best foreman that ever wore a miner's helmet. You're not a miner anymore, Arliss. You're a scout. They're going to the camp and coming back here. They don't need our help. They know the way. But I didn't bring torches or tinder, whispered Arliss. But he was only making excuses now. I got 2 torches and a tinder box. That leaves the rest of the company with 2 tinder boxes and more than enough torches. Arliss, came Gus's voice, angry now. Here's the thing, whispered Aiden. They can't get back here with the troop of soldiers until sometime tomorrow, maybe even the next day. If the Perthans fire up those thunder tubes again, there may not be a tomorrow for the Korenwalder army. In the meantime, there's a tiny little chance that we can do some good on this end. Arliss! Aiden! Gustus was furious now. I'm sorry, sir, called Arliss into the crack. We aren't coming back. I ain't asking, Arliss. I'm giving you an order. But Aiden and Arliss had already started making their way down the passage toward the Perthan camp.